I, 37M, have been married to my wife, 36F, for 9 years now, but we've known each other since high school, so needless to say, she's one of the people on the planet who knows the most about me, and I can also say that I know a whole lot about her, having grown into adulthood together. For the sake of telling this story publicly, let me just say that her name is Daphne. It breaks my heart to even need to have to ask for advice on this matter, but I honestly don't know what to do and my mental state isn't helping at all. I might need to give you all a bit of background so you can understand things a lot better. I don't want to give too many details, but I had a very rough time growing up, if that's not an understatement. I grew up with a mother addicted to drugs and a great father who met his end due to junkie friends of my mother's. I was the one who found him and had to call 911, and I don't know if I can ever fully appreciate the extent to which that scarred me. I will be honest and say that I grew up resenting my mother, and women in general, very strongly. I entered foster care with a very kind foster family, and I was unnecessarily a jerk to many of the people in the house, but with time, their love softened me, though I was still holding on to a lot of pain quite naturally. I started seeing a therapist very early in my life because I've been dealing with a lot of mental health issues, but I always try to stay positive and fight through things. Meeting Daphne in high school was also a major boost in my happiness, and we were friends for several years before the notion of anything romantic even started between us. Again, I was extremely resentful towards women, and I think having a healthy relationship with Daphne sort of helped me push out of that. Anyway, we both graduated high school and went to the same college where we both graduated once again. Honestly, everyone could tell that we'd likely end up together, but I guess trying to be the edgy young adult that I used to be, I would deny it and act oblivious to even the mere possibility of ending up with her. About 2 years after graduating from college, I officially asked her to be my girlfriend. I proposed to her a year later, and 9 years ago, we got married. Daphne wasn't there through the absolute hardest times of my life, but she's always known about my mental health struggles, and she has been there to witness some of my hardest battles. I've always apologized for the way I might treat her in those moments or the way she needs to baby me, but she's always been so kind, and she's always said that she doesn't mind. I even asked her at several points in our relationship whether she was sure about being burdened with me and my problems, but she always claimed that she was and that she'd go the entire way with me. I think that's enough background. You should be able to understand what I have to say with this much background, so let me try my best to tell it. The real problem started about 4 months ago when I was dealing with a pretty bad episode of depression. Honestly, as much as I've pushed forward in life, some of the things that happened way back in the past still have a pretty strong hold on me, and it's hard for me to completely let go of them, no matter how many therapy sessions I choose to attend, though bad episodes have become fewer and farther apart the older that I've gotten. That episode lasted about 5 days, and usually, Daphne is with me as much as she can be, but it was very clear that something was very different this time around. She stuck around the first 2 days, but halfway through the third day, she seemed cold and she told me that she had something that she had to do. I wasn't in the headspace to really inquire about what it was she had to do, so she left and came back much later in the night. I'm not too sure what the time was though. And the same thing happened in the next 2 days. It was the final day that I noticed that she came back around 1 a.m. I didn't have much to say about it though, again, because of how I was feeling. It was only when I was fully out of the whole thing that I started to think about it with a clear head. I've known her for about 2 decades, and that was very unusual behavior, so it stayed on my mind for quite some time. To be honest, cheating wasn't part of what jumped into my head, because you think that you know people, right? I considered bringing it up, but for some reason, I decided to let the whole thing go, which was likely a dumb move. Now, it wasn't until about 2 months later, when I had a really bad day, that I realized that something seemed to be up. Just like the other time, she basically disappeared halfway through the day, and I knew that something was really wrong at this point. It made the day much worse because it seemed like Daphne was avoiding me, which was very unusual behavior from her. Fortunately, this was just a bad day and not a proper episode of depression, so I bounced back by the end of the day, though she wasn't back by that point. As soon as she stepped back into the house, I paused the game that I was playing and I asked her where she had been. Not in an accusatory tone as far as I know, but she responded to me in an extremely defensive manner, asking why I was coming at her like that. It came out of nowhere, and I was really shocked because I was pretty sure that I hadn't spoken unkindly in any fashion. She seemed ready to explode at me, so I took a breath and asked her again as calmly as I could, and she just stared at me angry, for like a full 10 seconds before she eventually said she had a date with her girls that she completely forgot about. Honestly, that answer sounded suspect to me, so I brought up the previous time that I had been depressed and the way that she had also gone out during those days, but she claimed that she had no idea what I was talking about. To be fair, it had been over 2 months at that point, so I didn't want to call her a liar. In my head though, a pattern was starting to be established. Even after things started to seem fine between the two of us, it was still on my mind because I knew there was something being hidden. I just couldn't figure out what it was. It was when Daphne vanished on a third occasion. I wasn't even having a bad day, I was just really busy, that I knew something had to be up. It was so evident to me at that point. When she got back home that day, I didn't attempt to start any conversation about where she had been. I just conversed normally about mundane things, and she didn't lash out or anything like she did the other time. I was hoping she might have volunteered where she was this time around, but she didn't say anything to that effect. I think it was precisely at that point that I knew I was going to have to find out where she was going on my own. I have always been a relatively tech-savvy person and I know my way around an Android phone pretty well. As soon as my wife went into the shower without her phone, I went straight to Google Maps to check her location history that night. She went to a bar and then to what seemed to be a residential address. I checked the previous time that she had disappeared like that and it was pretty similar. She went to the same bar but she ended up in a different house. I was taking pictures of all of this with my phone especially because I planned to do more research on the addresses she was heading to. All I needed was for those addresses to truly belong to any of her girls and I would feel so much better. I was going to check the dates for the very first time that she disappeared but I could hear her wrapping up in the bathroom so I stopped. But honestly, I felt like I was going to lose my mind from the uncertainty. I wasn't too sure how I was going to find the information that I needed based off those addresses only, but I knew it would be the only way that I could get any closure. I knew there were two possibilities. Either my wife was cheating on me or she was truly going out with her girls quite unceremoniously. Going out to bars and ending up at someone's home could align with what she had told me, but it could also mean that she was going out to bars and going home with random men. She eventually came out of the bathroom, we did some small talk which I really had to struggle through, and she went to bed. She went to sleep with her phone in her hand and I carefully pried it out. My heart was beating furiously, trust me. She didn't wake up though, and after doing a little mental math, I checked for the first day that she disappeared suddenly. It was the same thing on all 3 days, though on 2 of those days, she went to the same address after the bar. I think it was at that point that I realized what I needed to do. I half considered hiring a private investigator to tell me who lived at the addresses that I had, but I realized there was an easier way for me to do things. I just need to set her up. The next weekend, I did my best to fake being in a mood, which was a lot harder than I assumed it'd be considering all the practice that I've gotten through my years. Exactly as I wanted, around 6 p.m., Daphne went to the room, came out dressed, and slipped out of the house, thinking she was unnoticed. A few minutes later, I went out too with the cartoonish disguise of a pair of shades, a jacket, and a baseball cap, and I headed straight to the same bar that I knew she was going to. I really hoped she wouldn't be able to identify me, otherwise my plan might never work again. I walked into the bar and it didn't take me long to spot her sitting at the bar. She was alone, but she had ordered a drink already. I remember hoping that her friends would eventually join her there. I found a corner to sit in that I hoped she wouldn't notice me in, and I waited for a long time before I saw someone sit beside her. They sat there in silence for a bit before he said something to her, and I guessed from the body language that they didn't know each other. If I had come in about 10 minutes later though, I'd likely have reached a different conclusion with the way they were laughing and the way she kept touching him. I really felt that I had seen enough at that point, but I used my self-control to wait and see how things were going to play out. There was still a stupid part of me that was hoping that her girls would show up and the guy was just there to help kill some time. Nope. I was there until about an hour and several drinks later when they both stood up and exited the bar together. I followed them as they went on foot about 3 blocks away. Then they went up into an apartment building and that was it. I felt like I was going to lose my mind, and as someone who already acknowledges that they have a fragile psyche, this certainly didn't help. I felt like I was going to lose my mind from across the street from the apartment building. I decided to wait though. I was going to wait until she came out, I would take a picture, and I would head back home. That was my plan. It was my plan until I actually saw her come out with the guy. I took several pictures as they stood under the well-lit entrance to the building, but when they had a parting kiss right there, I had taken my last photo. I stormed across the street against what I knew was my better judgment, and to be honest, I know I was very uncomposed. You can't blame me though. I can barely remember the things that I said, but I remember that I was shouting and yelling, asking her how she could do that to me, saying that I knew she was up to no good, and so on and so on. I was almost about to slug the guy beside her, with a stupid baffled look on his face, before she told him to go back to his house, and he obeyed right away. When it was just me and her, we just stood there staring at each other. I know I was shaking with rage and I was battling with a lot of very messed up thoughts in that moment. Do you know what it is like to realize that you can never really trust anyone? That anyone is capable of betraying you? I think it was when all these thoughts were pouring through my head that I asked her why. I'm tired of dealing with your depression and your moods. It's exhausting. I needed happiness. She didn't think much before she let that loose on me, and honestly, I was left broken by those words. Even now, a few days after this thing happened, those words still sting. It was exactly what I was trying to avoid when I wanted her to be sure she wanted something serious with me, because I have always known that I'll be forever burdened with depression, but she seemed to accept me for who I was and who I am. I just started walking away at that point. It took me over an hour to get back home because I was wandering the streets aimlessly. It was dangerous, but part of me wanted to get hurt honestly. Maybe the pain could end or something would happen to help me forget about everything. Looking back, that was a stupid thought, but I get where it was coming from. By the time I got back to the house, Daphne was there, and I guess she had enough time to realize how stupid her words were. She started to beg as soon as she saw me, but I said nothing. I went straight to our room and locked the door because seeing her was infuriating me. I wanted to tell her to get out of the house, but at the same time, I didn't want to spare a word on her. I barely slept, but the next morning, I didn't see her. I was glad I didn't need to interact with her, and I didn't care where she was. I still don't know where she is or where she's been, and I don't care. But at this point, I need to make her hurt. I've been living my life with hurt because I lived through so many traumas, and to have the person I thought was my safe space add to it was one of the most painful things that I've been through. I'll be reading every single comment that's dropped here because I have nothing better to do. But I want to know how I can make her hurt the way that she's made me hurt. I think that's the only thing that will help me feel some form of closure at this point, because I have no interest in cheating back. Update: I want to thank absolutely everyone that helped me out with my previous post. Honestly, it was really hard to open up like that and expose all my weaknesses, but most of the comments were incredibly kind and supportive, and I'm very grateful for that. It's been quite a while since I made my last post, but I'm glad to say that things are much better for me, and I took a lot of the advice that you all gave to plot my next move as best as I could. The first thing that I did was call her over for us to talk. She had no idea, but I had already spoken at length with a divorce attorney, and I knew there was no fixing what we had. I admit that I might have been fool enough if she had merely cheated on me once, but after cheating on me with what I assumed were multiple people and also the horrible words she spoke to me, I knew there was no going back. I would never be able to love this woman again. As soon as she got to my house, I asked her to sit down, and she did. I asked her how many people she had cheated on me with, and she initially said just the one, but I kept pressing, telling her that I knew more than she thought I did. She insisted over and over that it was just one person until I bluffed and told her I had hired a private investigator. I mentioned one address, and then another, and that's when she finally decided to let loose that she had slept with 3 people. I don't know if that was the absolute truth, but it was all I needed to hear. I handed her the divorce papers at that point, and I told her that I couldn't do life with her anymore. She started begging and pleading, which wasn't unexpected, but I think she realized that it was pointless, and she basically gave up after a bit. She walked out with the papers, and I drank the rest of the day. Eventually, we got to the whole divorce proceeding stage, and I was glad that I had a bit of evidence pointing to the fact that she was unfaithful, which helped swing things in my favor. Unsurprisingly, my mental health got dragged into the whole matter, with a lot of talk about how it made it hard to live with me. Honestly, things got really dirty at that point, and it was horrible hearing my struggles weaponized like that. Of course, I think most divorces are messy like that as far as movies have shown me. I don't want to bore you with how this side of things went, but it dragged on for a pretty long time. In the end, her lawyer was able to make it seem like her dealing with me and my mental health had been a major struggle for her, which I can admit, it definitely isn't easy, but it wasn't permitted as justification for her infidelity. For the most part, things pushed in my favor. I managed to escape any alimony payments, and I relinquished our apartment because there were going to be too many bad memories for me there. I managed to get the car though, which was certainly going to be more useful for me than the house would be. After the divorce, weeks later, once I had settled into my new place, I made sure to tell every single person who knew both of us that Daphne and I were splitting up. I went into detail, not telling a single lie, but exposing her for cheating on me because of my depressive episodes. I sent the same text to friends, family, co-workers I was familiar with, and even our former landlady. I needed to make sure that everyone knew that she was scumbag, so that if they wanted to get involved with her in the future, they'd know what they were up against. She called me out an hour after and cursed me out for like 10 minutes straight, but I just let her get it all out before hanging up the phone on her. I haven't spoken to Daphne since she called me to yell every expletive in the book, but a coworker replied to a message of mine saying that she's been having a hard time with gossip in the workplace, that maybe I'd consider recanting your statement to help her out. I left her on read. I don't think I'm going to do relationships anymore. There's too much fear in me now as to the ways a woman can hurt me, and I'm not excited to discover a new one. Maybe I'll have fun on dating apps, because the body has needs, but I don't think I'm after anything serious anymore. I'm relatively old, I don't desire children, and maybe not having a woman in my life brings simplicity, which is fine by me. Anyway, I hope those of you who choose to will find women you can trust and love forever, because I know that they're out there, but I'm just not willing to take the risk and find any of them myself. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Discovered my wife had been cheating on me with her high school crush throughout our entire marriage, so I exposed their affair to everyone at her reunion and kicked her out. I was married to my ex-wife for almost 4 years, but unfortunately, we had to go our separate ways because she did the unthinkable. My ex-wife and I met at a business seminar in town. We were there to listen to a renowned business guest speaker, and coincidentally, we sat beside each other. Throughout the seminar, we occasionally talked about a couple of things, which mostly had to do with the things we learned, and after the seminar was over, we exchanged contacts. We started talking, and about a week later, we decided to go out for lunch. As we had lunch that day, I was puzzled at how intelligent she was and her passion for business, and after our first date, we saw each other more often. Eventually, we ended up dating because I fell in love with her, and 8 months later, we married. We were married for almost 4 years before I found out she had been making a fool out of me. I'd love to add that, while my ex-wife and I were married, there was nothing she wanted that I didn't give her. I was still am a businessman and earned decent money. My ex-wife didn't own a business like mine. She worked for a business consulting firm and was earning well too. We had no kids because she said she wasn't ready, and I was okay with that. All through the 3 years of our marriage, I did my best as a good husband and even helped at home. I wanted more than anything for us to be happily married for as long as possible, offered to help in the kitchen, took her on surprise vacations, and did pretty much what a man would do to make the woman he loved happy. Even on my hectic and tired days, I made sure I went home early, never canceled on her, and most times, I had to reschedule many things because I believed family was one of the most important aspects of life. Unlike other couples, my ex-wife and I barely fought. She was more of an extrovert, a very social butterfly, and the life of the party, while I was reserved to a level. So, whenever we had a reason to argue, she was always at fault, and each time we were so close to fighting or arguing, I would always apologize because I wanted us to be at peace at all times. I know you all might think I did that as a weak man, but that's not why. I grew up in a very toxic environment, my parents were always fighting, and I did not want to replicate the same thing in my marriage. On our 3rd anniversary, we did a renewal of wedding vows, and almost 7 months after, I stumbled upon something that altered the rest of our marriage. That Saturday, I was cleaning the house, and I had every intention of cleaning our closet. My ex-wife and I shared a closet, she had been the only one cleaning it in the past. So, I decided to take things out of the closet that day and thoroughly clean up. I started by taking things out of the closet, and once I was done cleaning and dusting, I tried to arrange and organize them again. While organizing, I mistakenly kicked open one of my wife's shoe boxes as I tried to move around, and many letters and pictures were scattered on the ground. At first, I was worried I kicked out one of her expensive shoes because she left the very expensive ones in a box, but after I saw the letters, I was relieved. Initially, I thought the letters were old letters from an old teenage lover, or maybe there were letters she had never sent, and I was curious to find out how foolish in love she was at that time. But as I looked at them closely, I noticed recently added letters, which piqued my curiosity. As soon as I got down to the 4th line of one of the recently added letters, I felt my lower stomach churn, and my heartbeat increased, and as I got to the end, my world shattered. I was right, there were letters from an old lover, and it was her high school crush. The letter I read detailed one of their recent escapades, there were even photos of them lying under the sheets together. It wasn't just one letter, there were more of them, and one of them even talked about the night before our wedding, and how they enjoyed each other in bed. I wanted to be sure of what I read, so I went through all the letters and realized their relationship had been going on even while we were dating. Needless to ask if I was heartbroken, because I was beyond heartbroken. I was devastated and hurt, and in my 37 years on earth, it was the second time a woman had hurt me so much. The worst part was that I never saw it coming and would never believe my wife would cheat. I don't know how she did it because nothing was alarming about her. She still cared for me in the house and satisfied my bed needs, and I never suspected her or noticed anything fishy. I have watched a few videos on this channel where men say their wives changed suddenly or dressed differently, but with my ex-wife, there was no sign. Everything remained the same, and our love for each other grew over the years too. That same afternoon, she returned home and acted like everything was cool, but how I saw her changed. I tried to hide it, but it was not as easy as I imagined. It hurt so much that I loved her blindly, but she took my love for granted and cheated on me. The good thing was she was hosting her high school reunion, which was only a few days away. I had already scanned the letters and photos and intended to send them straight to her parents, but I got an idea from one of the stories I listened to here. As a part of their high school reunion, she created a slideshow of all her memories in high school, and I saw that as a perfect way to carry out my revenge. A night before her dear reunion, I secretly planted the letter and photos I scanned in her slideshow, almost at the beginning, and I waited for her to humiliate herself publicly. On D-Day, everyone gathered as planned, both from near and far, and they were all having a good time. At the venue, I saw her crush, and she exchanged a couple of smiles with him. Honestly, I almost lost it, but I didn't want to ruin my perfect plan. Eventually, the time for her slideshow came, and just as she was smiling at the screen and expecting to see another of her teenage hot girl pictures, the picture of her and her high school crush under the sheet popped up, and her mouth dropped. She was so shocked, but it wasn't just her. Her friends and classmates were shocked too. And just as she was trying to wrap her head around what was happening, the last slideshow came with an instruction from me, which read, "Don't come home tonight. We are getting divorced." Immediately she read that, she turned in my direction and ran towards me, but I walked out of the venue. Before I left, I could see the disappointment on the faces of her friends and classmates, and it appeased me. That night, she did not come home as I had instructed, but she kept blowing my phone with calls, text messages, and voicemails. One of her voicemails said she could explain, and it wasn't what I thought. The next day, I received a package I ordered. They were pillows and huge gift bags with a picture of her and her affair partner printed on them, and I sent them along with her stuff to her parents' house. I also dropped the letters and original pictures on their WhatsApp family group chat and exited the group. As expected, her parents tried to call, but I blocked their and my ex-wife's numbers too. When the divorce papers were ready, my lawyer reached out to her, and she signed them after delaying for a while. Although it's so painful, I'm glad we are not together anymore. Now, I get why most people kick against the idea of getting married, and I think I might fall in love one day, but I'm done with getting married and repeating the cycle with unfaithful women.